Crackdown 3 is a mess, but contrary to the popular belief, you can still enjoy playing this game. It does have its shining moments, and the Crackdown formula is still technically a fun thing to partake in, but the game is still a mess. It is not the worst Crackdown game. I still reserve that ranking to Crackdown 2. However, it is definitely not as good as Crackdown 1. It falls short in pretty much every category, and in order to really discern what makes this game such a mess, we are just going to have to kind of dive right into this and start talking about Crackdown 3, a sequel that I've waited for 9 years. Let's get right into it. Crackdown 3, like its predecessors, is a open world, third-person driving shooter, collect-a-thon, you name it. It's got some elements of kind of all three of those, even a little bit of platforming, which is kind of cool. The first Crackdown game was awesome. I mean, you pay for the Halo 3 beta, you get Crackdown for free. Oh, well, you know, what was this cool, you know, third-person, open-world, you know, superhero game, basically, that came free with my Halo 3 beta. But Crackdown was actually, it was good. It had a ton of heart, ton of charm. It was rough around the edges, but it was fun. It was a ton of fun. I mean, I remember going through, you know, the three different districts, taking down all the mob bosses. You know, shooting people together with like the tether gun, and then harpooning them to my car and driving into people. You could do a lot of crazy stuff in Crackdown 1, and upgrading your agent and finding all the hidden orbs and doing all the cool things you can do around the city. It was a lot of fun. The game had its issues. It was a little buggy. It did have, of course, it was not a flawless game, but it was a great first attempt that I really enjoyed, and it got a lot of playtime out of Crackdown 1. Keys to the City mode was a blast. The physics were just super fun to mess around with. The world was so charming and had a ton of cool, interesting places to see. Engaging with all the enemies was fun, and climbing the agency tower was a huge challenge. Messing with the peacekeepers and doing a bunch of stuff. Like, there was a lot you could do in Crackdown 1. Still such a good game. And then Crackdown 2 came out a few years later, and it was really lazy. The story took a big hit. The enemies you fought were much less interesting. They reused the same map and just kind of muddied it up and dirtied it up to make it, look like time had passed and the city was in ruins. Just a lot of dumb mistakes with Crackdown 2. It was really boring. It still had the same Crackdown elements to it, but they kept all the same flaws and then added new ones and didn't really improve anything. The only thing that was objectively better about Crackdown 2 was the wingsuit. That was awesome, and unfortunately the wingsuit is not in this game, which is a big negative on my end, but regardless, Crackdown 2 was just a huge step down, and then the series went dark for years and years. Then finally, Microsoft announces Crackdown 3. 2014, they're making it. It's gonna have all this awesome, cool destruction and the cool elements, and they're bringing it back, and it's Crackdown like we all love and know it. And then delay after delay after delay, and pushing back and changing their minds about things, and just now here we are, 2019. The game is out, and it is a hell of a lot different than they said it would be. And let's see if that all ended up being worth the delays. So first off, I want to just go through the things I think this game does right. We have the director, Goodwin. He's back. His voice is amazing, and I like hearing him say things. The game is pretty at times. Some of the elements, the lighting is really nice, and some of the aspects of the game does look pretty. The character models are awful, but some of the alpha effects and texture work is pretty good. I'll give them that. It definitely looks a lot better than the old Crackdown games, and it sounds a whole lot better. They did, unfortunately, remove a lot of iconic sounds, like the shield breaking sound. There's a lot of other sounds that were like iconic to Crackdown, but the overall sound design and the music of the game, it's good. I'll definitely say it's one of the better aspects of the game. It's on PC as well, so you can enjoy 60 plus FPS instead of being locked to 30, which is good. I wish I could play Crackdown 1 and 60 FPS, but I'll settle for this. And what else? Terry Crews is great. He plays a side character in this game, and you can play as his agent as well. That's cool. I love Terry Crews. And I think that's it. So I think that's all of the positives, unfortunately. Oh wait, no. One more thing. Agility orb hunting is still as addictive as it was before, and there's just a ton more of them. And agility orbs are awesome. And whoever came up with that idea back when Crackdown 1 was being created, good on you, buddy, because that was awesome. Very smart, and I love it. But yeah, that's gonna pretty much wrap up my praise for the game, because every other aspect is a huge downgrade from Crackdown 1. So let's talk about the world. So this new city ain't got nothing on Pacific City. It's a little bigger, but overall it's pretty small, not as varied. So Pacific City was separated into 3 distinct islands. There was tons of different personality and charm in each island. Los Muertos, their island was, you know, much more kind of like run down. It was kind of like based around like, you know, like Latin gangs and stuff, you know. So a lot of the culture and a lot of like the stuff from that you'd see in like those areas, lots of like LA inspired landmarks and things like that were put into that section. Then you had the Russian Volk, so lots of greenery and grass and just you know, big open spaces, you know, in their island. Then you had the Triad gangs, Shai-Gen, which was located in their own sections. That was all huge urban environments, tons of tall buildings. That was like the tallest buildings in the game were there. Just lots of you know, tall buildings and just super tight and packed together elements. So these 3 islands were super distinctive. And then you had like other areas surrounding them that were, you know, that would kind of, you know, add to like the areas, but you got none of that here. Everything's really samey looking. You do have some districts that are different from each other, like you have like the slum districts, and then you have, you know, like kind of like the more rich person sections and the more industrial areas, but a lot of it is just real same boring looking stuff. There's a couple cool areas that I thought were kind of neat, but ultimately I think the world itself is just boring and way too small for a current gen game as well. So the world itself, not super interesting. The enemy faction we're fighting against is even worse. So it seems like we can't make any progress. In Crackdown 1 we had 3 factions of enemies. In Crackdown 2 we had 2 factions of enemies, and now in this game we have 1 faction of enemies, so just continuously losing factions. In Crackdown 1 we had the Los Muertos, the Volk, and Shai-Gen to go up against, each with their own different distinctive personalities, tactics, weaponry, you know, things that you would immediately classify as. The second game, we had the Cell, which was like a terrorist organization that was trying to take down the agency, and of course the Freaks, the zombie creatures that you unleash in Crackdown 1, which technically they're in Crackdown 1 as well, but I won't count them as another faction. They'll just stay as just little side enemies that you can fight sometimes. Crackdown 3, though, all we have is Terra Nova. They try to separate it into different divisions, like you have the security division, and then you have the industrial division, and then the other one, the robotics division, or whatever they call it, science division, whatever. And that's not, it doesn't work. They're all just, they play the exact same. The same enemies, no different personalities. They all work for the same people. They all use the same tactics. The only difference is what they're weak to. So like the robotics are weak to like energy weapons, and human people are weak to bullets and stuff, which is whatever. It's just all not really interesting. It's pretty boring. I will actually praise for a moment the enemy variety, because there is just more enemy variety. Like there's people in giant mech suits, and there's people that like heal their teammates and stuff, and that is nice to see. The enemy variety in and of itself is definitely better than the previous games. But I guess we should move on to the next pillar of enemy combat, which is the boss fights. Now, the boss fights in Crackdown 1 were not really anything spectacular. They were big, huge, battles with an enemy with a ton of health and all their minions around them. But the cool thing about the boss fights was everything leading up to the final confrontations, right? So, yeah, you would have to kind of search around, find the enemy's strong points. They'd be pinged on your map, and then you'd be like, okay, this is the enemy, I can go take him out, and taking him out will affect the organization in this way. So taking out the weapons manufacturer guy, he'll have, like less weapons on the streets, or whatever. Like, there was always like a reason you were going after the person. They kind of do that in this game, but just to a much lesser extent. You would go and you take out those people, and essentially what happens was the more people you took out from the gang, the weaker the actual gang leader would be when you fought him at his stronghold. So not only would you be getting stronger, but you taking out his enemies, you taking out the enemies, his like subordinates, would make his stronghold weaker. So when you finally stormed the place, you'd be able to have a much better possibility of living and surviving and killing the enemy than you would if you just rushed in at the start of the game. Nothing like that really happens. The boss fights in this game are pretty lame. Some of them try to be kind of cool, but ultimately just kind of fall flat. So the only one boss fight I thought was kind of cool was the Roxy boss fight. She's like this AI that you have to go up against, and that was kind of cool. You just kind of climbed the tower and then shot like her weak points, and then that was it. But then all the rest of the bosses were just lame. Like, there's this one boss that he has like a shield on him, and you have to hit him with a physical object to take the shields away before you can do any damage. But then once you get a certain damage limit, then he like teleports away and starts kind of just retreating, and you have to just keep chasing after him, and it's really lame. It's really boring. Didn't like that fight. But then the final boss fight is just dumb as well. Like, none of the boss fights were particularly hard or interesting, but I guess I gotta give them points for trying to get creative with them. I just don't think that the execution was done all too well, to be honest, like at all. And that kind of leads me on to my next major point here. Crackdown 1 was so full of character and heart and charm, and this game just kind of lacks all that stuff. The director Goodwin, he's giving it his all. He's making references to past games, and he's saying stuff he said in those games. The whole skills for kills thing makes a comeback, which is nice to hear him say that again. But ultimately, he's the only one that has any character, and his character is drastically different from the past games. It's like the developers of this game forgot that the agency are the bad guys, because now we have this faceless corporation taking over everything and being super evil and trying to make super weapons to like kill everyone. And it's like, yeah, well, obviously we're doing the right thing here. Whereas in the previous games, it's like, yeah, Crackdown 1, we took out all the mafia bosses and everything, but now we're taking over. And it was like, oh snap, agency is actually kind of corrupt. And then Crackdown 2, obviously Project Sunburst, that was just the agency, stepping their foot down and becoming super like authoritarian. But then in this game, suddenly we're like superhero saviors that everyone looks up to, and we're inspiring a rebellion. And it's like, what the hell? Like, this is not Crackdown. This is not the agency. And this is not Director Goodwin. He's like good-natured and wants to help people and stuff. It's like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that at all, guys. So I didn't like that at all. And then your other partner, Echo, I don't know why we needed another person. Director Goodwin was enough. We don't need two voices in our heads. You have the most iconic part of Crackdown is Director Goodwin, his voice. The voice of the agency. We don't need two. So Echo was fine. She doesn't really do anything. She's not offensive at all. She's not annoying. I just don't know why we needed two people when we already had Director Goodwin. All of her dialogue could have just been his. But regardless, the game just was lacking that charm. Even Terry Crews, just being loud Terry Crews, couldn't really save it. I didn't even play as Terry Crews in this game for more than a couple minutes, so I can't really say anything. But it just was really bland all throughout. I can't remember a single bad guy besides Roxy. Even the main antagonist, I don't remember anything about her. Granted, I didn't remember a ton about the main antagonist of the first game either, aside from the gang leaders of each three gangs, but But I mean, still the world itself and everything around it had more charm, and that definitely made up for that, you know, having the lackluster boss fights and lackluster enemies in the first game. But yeah, there's nothing like that oozes charm or creativity that really can save this game for me in that regard. And then you have the story. So Crackdown 1 was pretty straightforward. You're part of the agency, you're a superpowered agent, increase your skills, defeat all the enforcers, kill the gang leaders, rinse and repeat 2 times until the whole city's been cleaned, right? Simple. Easy peasy. Crackdown 2, you messed up in the first game, the whole city's super horrible, but now we're gonna stop it. Project Sunburst, activate all the nodes, destroy the freaks forever, take down the terrorist organization Cell, and regain control over the Pacific City. Easy peasy. This game story is more of the same, but doesn't really do anything with it, with what was set up in the previous games, aside from like a small nod. Essentially, you're a group of agents sent in to take over the city from the Terra Nova organization. All of you die, you're revived, and then you take them all down single-handedly, and then that's it. So, simple, easy peasy, but I mean, there's no callbacks or setups of anything from the previous games. The Cell organization having their own agents is not in play until the very end credits cutscene. So it's just, nothing really stands out. It was just kind of, it was a nothing story. Like, there's nothing that was memorable about it or exciting. It was just very bland. Which I guess you could say is par for the course for Crackdown, but at least in Crackdown 1 you have a motivation that works. You can see the progress and then you have something to work towards. And Crackdown 2, whatever. You did see your progress, but motivation was kind of dumb and the game itself story was bad, but Crackdown 2 takes it to another level. And there's only there's 2 cutscenes. 2 whole cutscenes in the game. The opening cutscene and the ending cutscene. The rest is just a whole bunch of nothing. Which is weird to say in a 2019 game, but just 2 cutscenes. Not great. But now we're gonna kind of start getting into more of the nitty-gritty and some of the more nitpicky elements of this game as well. So let's talk about gameplay, specifically gunplay. It's the same lock on to your enemies shtick we've had the last 2 games. I really wish that they would have improved this somewhat or done something different with it, but no, it's just you lock on, it's a hard lock, you shoot, pull the trigger until the enemy's dead. But with the changes they made to the physics engine, and by that I mean basically removing the physics engine, it is not anywhere near as satisfying. Even with the new punchier gun sounds, it still just doesn't do anything for me. Especially once you get some of the more powerful weapons down the line, it just doesn't really have any effect on you. It's really lame. And then the gun selection, like Crackdown 1 had so many guns, regular bullet guns and a lot more, intricate, more creative guns like the harpoon gun or the tether grenades, things like that you can really experiment with and have fun with. Even Crackdown 2, while lacking as well, did have some cool variety and some cool weapons as well. This game is really lacking in that department as well. There's some experimental stuff, like, some like laser guns and, it's like things like that, but ultimately it's just not great. There's only like 2 bullet-based weapons in the game, and one of them's a pistol, and then the other one's a little rinky-dink PDW you get at the start of the game, and the rest are all like just weird like laser guns or acid guns and things like that. So you don't have like a standard arsenal that you'd see in like every other game, and it just leads to the enemy, like, you don't ever feel like you're upgrading your weapons. Like, when you go and defeat an enemy and you pick up their weapon and you get it, I never felt like it was a big upgrade until I got like the very last assault rifle that is like the most powerful thing in the game. Like, that was the only time I ever actually felt like I needed to switch weapons. I used the rinky-dink PDW and a homing launcher for like the entire game, or a grenade launcher for like the entire game, until I got the homing launcher and then the super powerful assault rifle. Whereas in Crackdown 1, you had like the Volk that used like the M16s and stuff. So when you were in Los Muertos cleaning them all up and they were using all the MP5s and pistols, then you got to the Volk and they had assault rifles, and you're like, okay, cool, like I can take that and I'm now stronger, I have a better gun to use. This little M16 that I have is much better than the, you know, rinky-dink Glock I was using, you know, the whole way throughout the whole other, you know, island. So you're upgrading and you're fighting stronger enemies. And then when you get to Shaijen, they have these high-tech rifles, and they're sniper rifles and homing launchers and stuff, and you're like, whoa, where the hell did all this come from? Now I'm upgrading my tech again, taking their weapons and using them, and there was a real nice flow there, and I just don't feel like that flow was here at all in Crackdown 3. Speaking of weapons, by the way, you just automatically unlock them the second you pick them up. You don't have to actually take them to a supply point like you used to in the first game, which also was changed as well, because now all you need to do is just walk up next to a supply point and you suddenly have it. 90% of the supply points in the game don't even have enemies there anyways, so it's just a matter of just walk to the objective and then you're done, which is disappointing to say the least. But there's just kind of a lot of stuff like that, you know, a lot of little nitty-gritty things. Vehicle handling is slightly better than in Crackdown 1 and 2, but I mean, that's it really. Vehicle transformations like they had in the first game, where you, based on your driving skill, your vehicle would perform differently and look differently, that's gone as well. They took that out of Crackdown 2, but still, that's gone. Now you just have one vehicle that changes forms. You know, you have the one vehicle and then it has the 3 different forms. But you just unlock those as you level up, so it's not really changing or doing anything. And I mean, driving in this game is kind of pointless anyways, except for just getting a little bit quicker to where you're going, since 99% of the time you're going to be jumping over rooftops in the air, doing superpowered stuff, without a wingsuit, sadly, but you know, whatever. They did add boosters instead of a wingsuit, so you have like triple jumps and some dashes and stuff, kind of like Prototype or Saints Row, just as an example. But yeah, I think the wingsuit was probably the better aerial edition. I do appreciate what some of the moves the boosters allow you to do, though they really let you break those rooftop races. I mean, seriously, I finished some of those in like under half the amount of time needed for gold, just because of a way you can use the boosters to maneuver around really quickly. So some of the uses of it is cool, but I definitely would have rather had the wingsuit, or just boosters and the wingsuit, because the wingsuit was awesome. It was really cool. I loved the wingsuit in Crackdown 2. Hopefully they bring it back in like a DLC update or something like that. But I mean, ultimately, the campaign was just disappointing to me after having waited so long for this game, you know, and being such a huge fan of Crackdown. It just wasn't what I was expecting, and it wasn't what they were advertising to us. You know, you go look back at that first trailer and none of that's in the game. Just none of that at all is in the game. It's really disappointing. The agent design as well. Not a big fan of the agent like outfit design, and it doesn't really change much as you level up either. In Crackdown 1, you know, depending on what skill even that you level up depends on how different you look. And then in Crackdown 2, they just made everyone look the same with the same armor updates. But in this game, it just doesn't really, I don't know. I didn't really enjoy the design of the agent in this game as much as I thought I would. But campaign itself, pretty disappointing, but I did still enjoy it, I guess. It was really, really short. I beat the whole thing in like 6 hours. But, you know, going and searching for agility orbs, that was fun, and it was just kind of mindless shooty bang bang explosion stuff. Even with the change to the physics and the downgrades and stuff, it was still at least an enjoyable couple hours. So I would still recommend playing through the campaign if you have an afternoon and Game Pass or something. I would never recommend buying this game at $60. Honestly, $10 is already kind of pushing it for me, but just a Game Pass subscription, I beat this in a day, right? So definitely worth it if you want to give it a shot. Play a couple 6-hour things. But what I will never recommend under any circumstance is the multiplayer. Oh my lord. Multiplayer is something else. So, whereas the campaign was just disappointing, the multiplayer is straight up false advertisement. I mean, if you go back and watch some of the old presentations and like E3 and stuff and how they showed off the destruction, none of that is here at all. They showed how you could like shoot the wall with the gun, and the bullets would like, you could cut out a circle of the wall with your bullets, and then the wall would like fall apart realistically. Yeah, that's not in the game. They showed how buildings would topple over and like land on other buildings, and then the building would destroy that building. Yeah, that's not in the game at all either. Like none of that is here. All of the destruction is basically pre-rendered in huge chunks. There's no big overworld map or anything like they advertised as well. It's all just small little arenas that don't even look like buildings. It's all like simulated, you know, glowy, kind of like Halo 5, that mode in Halo 5, like where it's all digital. It looks like that. Like you're fighting in arenas that look like that with huge chunks of walls. All the buildings are basically just empty husks, so they said there would be like rooms and everything that you could break into. There's no rooms or anything in the buildings. It's all just nothingness. There's no, you can't even destroy the building until you break off every single piece of it, then you can destroy the steel beams. So it's not even full destruction like they advertise. Like the whole thing's false advertising. And whoever thought it was a good idea to put lock-on aim into a multiplayer shooter, just fire that person. It didn't work in Crackdown 2, it's not gonna work here. At least in Crackdown 2, they had a soft lock-on, and then you still had to aim in the middle. You know, you still had to maneuver your stick to aim at the person. In this game, no. Just full lock-on with, like, homing rockets and launchers and full auto assault rifles. Like, it's bad. It's not fun. There's no even ranking system or progression of any kind. It's boring, it's false advertising, and it's bad. Like, that is by far the worst part of the game. It drags down the score immensely. What would be maybe, like, a 6 out of 10 game, you know, gets dragged down much more. And that's kind of where I land at, is how am I going to rate the whole game as itself? If I was rating just the campaign, honestly, it's not unplayable by any means. It's just a disappointing sequel. It's just a bland, short, disappointing sequel to a game a lot of people loved. But those can still be enjoyable. You know, just because the game disappointed you doesn't mean it has no value at all. And that's what I think a lot of people are overstepping here, is that, yeah, as a Crackdown fan myself, Crackdown 3 was a disappointment, but I still enjoyed it, I still played it. It's not like broken to the point where you can't enjoy any bit of it, and some of the things, you know, like the agility hunting and all that stuff is still there and as good as it was in Crackdown 1. So if it was just the campaign, I would give this game a 6 out of 10 right now. But it's not just the campaign. That multiplayer is atrocious, and if it was taken out of the game entirely, if this game had less content, the game would be better. But because that multiplayer is in the game, honestly, it drives down the score big time. I was tempted. I was hesitant to score this game at first. I was gonna score this game a 4 out of 10 because of the multiplayer and how big of a drastic thing it is, but I decided to compromise. I am going to go with just a 5 out of 10. If you completely ignore the multiplayer and pretend it doesn't exist, then this game does have some value. If you want to play the multiplayer, you're insane. It's awful. But ultimately, just wasn't what I wanted from a true Crackdown sequel. Hopefully, they can do better next time. I guess we'll be waiting another 10 years for another Crackdown sequel, but if that ever comes out, because I'm sure they're just going to delay it and delay it and delay it. But, you know, it is what it is. Crackdown 1 is still around. It actually was, it's backwards compatible on the Xbox One, so I can play that anytime. And it's, you know, they even bumped up to 4K, so it's not like I can't ever play Crackdown 1 again. I can, if I'm ever in a Crackdown mood, I have that. And at least this isn't the worst Crackdown game. I would still say that the single player itself is better than Crackdown 2, even just for the sheer amount of they tried different things and they didn't get lazy with it. Because Crackdown 2's biggest fault is that it's so lazy. It's just the laziest sequel. But Crackdown 3, it did try more things. I just don't think that all those things worked out very well. So I know that this was a much longer review and I went into a lot more detail than I usually do. But that's just because of how passionate I am about the first Crackdown and the series as a whole. I've been a fan for years, over a decade now. Over a decade. And to see this happen, it really upset me. So I wanted to talk about this and really air my full opinions on it. And if you hate it, whatever. If you hate my review, if you think I'm just an idiot, whatever, right? But at least I got my opinion out there and I said what I needed to say about a game that I played that disappointed me. So let me know what you guys think down below. If you guys are having fun with the game, Just, you know, go ahead and let me know. I won't judge. But I'll see you guys the next one. Stay classy.